Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show right here on the World Crypto Network. We have an amazing show for you guys today. We are truly global today. We have Thomas Hunt, aka Mad Bitcoins, and Jimmy Song over there at the Breaking Bitcoin Conference in Paris. Then we got Tone Vase over there in Geneva, Switzerland. We're trying to bring you guys the global news here. The last episode of the Bitcoin News Show, we had Yen and Joe talk about Bitcoin mining in China. They were actual miners in China, Bitcoin miners. So definitely, guys, got to check that out. So that's been really great. So we truly are global over here at the World Crypto Network, and we hope you guys are having a great time. Just a couple of quick announcements, guys, before we introduce the guests. We have World Crypto Network going over 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, if you guys can believe that or not. It's kind of blowing my mind this year. We are definitely seem to be going up with the price. I'm seeing content creators in the space have their views and subscribers and Twitter followers increase. So that's really great news. It seems the word is spreading as we are over $150 billion market now these days in the crypto space. So very cool. And then again, just one more time, just guys, really highly advise it. Check out the last episode of the Bitcoin News Show with those Chinese miners. They had a lot of great stuff to say and really interesting points of view. So without further ado, let us introduce the guests today. We have Mr. Sam Wouters, Bitcoin speaker and evangelist. Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Really glad to have you here. Sorry to pull you in at the last minute there, Sam.
No
you normally have a few more guests, but I guess everybody's at Breaking Bitcoin these days. So
I'm so sorry I can't be there.
I wish I could be there too. I was tweeting it out all this morning. So having a really good time watching that and the live stream. And of course, we'll have the live stream of Breaking Bitcoin link in the show notes as well. But the special guest this week, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let us introduce him, Mr. Sunny Ray, the co-founder of Unocoin in India. Sunny, how you doing?
I am doing very well. Thanks for having me on the show. Really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I've been following you for a while on Twitter. We've been hearing about Unocoin. We've been hearing about Bitcoin spreading around the world. So we're really interested to get your point of view and ask you a couple questions about what's going on down there later in the show. But first, let's start out with a little bit of some breaking news here from Jimmy Song and Mad Bitcoins. I have the link in the show notes on this morning's Today in Bitcoin on the World Crypto Network. They were talking about how Bitfury decided that they don't need to support the 2x any longer because there is now Bitcoin Cash. You know, the original agreement was when there was only one Bitcoin, one fork, and now that we got two forks, well now that we have the additional fork, Bitfury doesn't see the reason to support the 2x. So that's some really interesting information. We'll see if other people follow or not. So let's get the panelists maybe their views and points of view on this. So Sunny, let me ask you, what do you think about the 2x in general? What do you think about the breaking news of Bitfury not going along with the 2x anymore? And do you think others will follow?
Well, I think, okay, well, I mean, just like we were talking about before the show, I wanted to start with the caveat of saying that, look, like, even at Unocoin, I'm not our technical lead. So these are highly, I think, technical matters. And even though I'm an electrical engineer and I'm, one of the co-founders of a Bitcoin company, I still don't think that qualifies me to have really strong opinions about these matters. Like, it's like asking me about, how an Intel chip is built. Like, I use it all the time. But from my kind of, layman's perspective, I saw SegWit 2x as an attempt to kind of bridge the gap between, two different worlds. Did it succeed? Will it succeed? That's yet to be determined. I think in the Bitfury development, that's obviously a very, very new one. I just heard about it now, and so I would definitely want to look into that. And I think Bitfury is obviously an influential player in the space, so I think it'll be something to keep a close eye on. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's very interesting to have them, have this announced at Breaking Bitcoin. It's really great to see, all of the no 2x stickers at Breaking Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know if you've been following along with the Twitter feed of hashtag Breaking Bitcoin, but everybody's got a no 2x sticker. Like, they're just everywhere. People are sticking them in their hats, putting them on their shirts. And so it's really great to see. I've been retweeting a few of those pictures to see that. So it really appears that the users don't want 2x. So we'll see how that's playing out. let's go to Sam. So Sam, what do you think about this crazy 2x stuff? I know you've been on vacation, maybe been out of the out of the loop for a little bit, but that's okay.
You're never truly out, I guess.
Yeah, Sam, we know you're never truly out, man. You got your weekly Bitcoin news on your website, so or monthly Bitcoin news, so people can go back and check that out. I highly recommend. It's great for archival purposes, and even I use it to set up the show once in a while, Sam, just to make sure I don't miss anything. So really cool. So Sam, so what do you think about, first of all, the 2x? Do you think that they're going to go through with it? What do you think about it? And then what do you think about Bitfury now announcing that they may not go ahead with the 2x today?
So personally, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I think 2x is a great thing, and not because already looking around, and not because of what they're trying to propose, but more because it helps us to see the incentives and the ideas that everyone in the space has. And you kind of see that a lot of people are trying to do something seemingly unreasonable with Bitcoin, or something like consensus breaking. And without something like 2x existing, we wouldn't know who these people are. We wouldn't know what their motives are, and it would all kind of blend into the background. So personally, I think it's a good thing that it exists, purely because we see what people are trying to do with Bitcoin. And it's very much shown me which people really understand how the protocol works, which really understand where we want to go with this. And I very much like seeing this happen. It just gives you a lot of insight in all of the different parties involved in Bitcoin. And I really, personally, I think SegWit 2x is a good thing just to see what happens, but not because I want to see it happen on Bitcoin itself specifically. I'm personally a strong believer of the current core roadmap, which is just trying to see how far we can take things with Lightning, and then gradually upgrading with hard forks from there on out, including a lot of other features that we might need that we can do without a hard fork. So I like the way it's going. I think the 2x developments are pretty interesting. Quite glad that Bitfury announced their withdrawal now, because I agree with them. I mean, if Bitcoin Cash wouldn't have existed, then I would have understood why people would remain pretty adamant about it. But now it's kind of like, okay, what are you doing it for? Because, okay, you want to upgrade the main Bitcoin network, but if we look at the mempool, it's doing fine. We're getting better fee estimations. Of course, things can always get better, but we're still in a very early stage. So I think it's going well. I'm quite positive about the space and overall.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to watch all this game theory play out, both with the user-activated soft fork and then now the SegWit 2x. Eric Lombroso was just speaking at the Breaking Bitcoin conference today, talking about how they really don't want to use BIP9 anymore, and that they actually went through all of this game theory with the user-activated soft fork to try to play out like what could happen, and with the 2x, I mean, here we go again. So more information.
I'm super happy it happened, because if we wouldn't have used BIP9, we wouldn't have seen that it's such an issue. And then maybe somewhere along the road, we would have noticed it that way. If we wanted to implement fungibility improvements, then maybe it would have been an issue then. So the sooner we figure out all of these problems, the stronger we'll come out of it. So I think it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, what doesn't what doesn't kill Bitcoin makes it stronger. Exactly. As everything is continuing to immunize Bitcoin, and there was a lot of people at Breaking Bitcoin that were speaking about Bitcoin's immunization as of late with this whole user-activated software thing. So, and of course, Bitcoin Cash and whatever else is ailing Bitcoin at the moment at any given time. So, very fascinating stuff. Sonny, do you have any other comments to speak about on this?
I know. I mean, again, the last year or so has been very, very dynamic. We haven't even talked about all the other things outside of Bitcoin, but even within the Bitcoin world, I think a lot of motives have shown. And, I got to admit, the whole Bitcoin Cash thing, that wasn't something that I wasn't too sure as to what was going to happen. But it's interesting to see how the free market, kind of plays out, despite what, my feeling is towards a certain group or whatever. I think it's just interesting that, people are kind of dividing into different tribes and groups, and they're just doing their thing.
Absolutely. Just really quick, just a side question, a follow-up question for you, Sonny and Sam. Because I really align with Greg Maxwell's point of view on forks. And what he likes to say, I believe, is that we want to do hard forks only for actual bug fixes, for actual problems that we can all get consensus on really easily. Like if something's going to break Bitcoin, okay, we should all agree that that should be fixed as soon as possible. But any additional features like SegWit and such should now be just a soft fork. And so because that's a little bit more difficult to get consensus for. So that should be a soft fork to remain backwards compatible, but only hard fork the immediate issues and problems. What do you think about that, Sonny?
Okay, so I mean, again, I want to just slightly make the distinction between Sunny and, let's say, Unocoin, right? Because Unocoin, obviously, even though I'm one of the co-founders, it has many stakeholders, right? So I've personally been a big fan of, maybe again, despite what a lot of people might think, I've been a big fan of Core. I've been following their work very closely. I've spent time with guys like Peter Todd and Adam Back, a lot of the people at Blockstream, and I think a lot of the kind of malicious intent that people sometimes assume these people have, I don't see it. And I do think that they're doing great work. And yeah, I've always been a fan of, what they've been putting out. So I do like the idea of, again, soft forking and making sure that, the integrity of the system's intact. But again, with all this said, like I said, yeah, I did an engineering degree, but I don't program every day. So who am I to even, have opinions about this? So I don't know. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
Well, hey, Sonny, we are early adopters here, obviously, right? We are considered the innovators, so to speak, in the stage that we're in. So it is really important that we get information and opinions from people like yourself, who even are not high, very low level or high level, however you want to look at it, engineers, very, 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 work at the very, very bottom levels of the protocol. So, it's still good because you are a business owner in the space, and we would definitely like opinions of the
yeah.
So it's really great to get your opinion, Sonny. So thanks again for coming on and telling us what you think. So Sam, what do you think about Greg Maxwell's fork policy ideas?
I think first of all, I'm glad Sonny is humble about this, because I see a lot of CEOs in the space, etc., who aren't really developers, who form a lot of opinions on what should be done on a technical level. And I'm kind of the same as Sonny. I don't feel technically qualified enough to really judge about this, but I do think I get Greg Maxwell's train of thought, but at the same time, I feel like there's a list somewhere on the wiki with all of the things that can only be done to Bitcoin through a hard fork. So I would imagine that would somehow be included if a hard fork needs to happen. But I assume that trying to do multiple things at the same time with one hard fork might complicate things. I don't really know what that involves. So if it would complicate things, then I can imagine they really only want to do hard forks for bug fixes, which are just singular things. But if they can fix multiple stuff at the same time without too many issues, then I would imagine they would also want to include some of that stuff that they've been hoping to get through for a long time. Because I think it was Adam Back who mentioned, let's not hard fork now in November or whatever, but let's maybe look at a future date and then also look at this list of stuff that we want to include so we can really get the most out of that moment.
Yeah, and I have to fully agree with that because it just seems logical to me. I mean, I'm not a low-level programmer. I'm not a C++ programmer or a core developer or anything like that. I'm just a web developer, so I just work with C# and JavaScript. But I can tell you that just seems logical to me. Why do we have to hard fork every time we want to increase the block size? That just makes no sense to me. You want to get the absolute most that you can out of every hard fork, especially as Bitcoin is growing and growing and growing. I mean, it's getting harder and more difficult to gain consensus on things like SegWit. So if you're going to hard fork, you best put a whole bunch of stuff in there and not just have to increase the block size every time with every hard fork. That just doesn't seem logical to me. So very interesting views. Thanks so much, guys, for your opinion so far. I think we can move on to the next topic. Before we do that, guys, if everybody could just give us a thumbs up on the video, that helps us get to more people's feeds. That helps us spread the video and the information about Bitcoin. If you're new to the show, guys, please hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have as many subscribers as possible. Like I said, mentioned earlier in the show, we just went over 30,000. So we're really proud of that, extremely proud and extremely thankful for all those people out there who really enjoy our feeds. We are trying to do more and more content and get more and more information out there to you guys. We actually even have a website that's coming in the next couple of weeks, so I'm really excited about that. And it should be a great time, guys. Well, we're really hoping that the space continues to explode, and we're enjoying every minute of it. It's absolutely interesting. So let's move on to the second topic here, which is about China banning ICOs and then banning Bitcoin. Probably wasn't the smartest idea. So reports came out, of course, that China actually banned Bitcoin completely, banned all the Bitcoin exchanges, but that's seeming to be not the truth. As we get more and more information coming out of Twitter and such, it turns out that it was coming from an account that wasn't very credible, and it was just a lot based on assumption. So far, it looks like Bitcoin is not banned in China. So maybe you could give us your thoughts on that, Sonny, on what do you think about China banning ICOs or ICOs being banned in general? And what do you think about a whole country banning Bitcoin? Is that even possible? And would a country actually really do that? Or would it just, and if they did do that, wouldn't it just hasten the adoption anyway? So let me ask you, Sonny, what do you think about all this?
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot of questions in there, right? Let me see here. I mean, can a country ban ICOs or Bitcoin? I mean, yes, like they could try, right? I mean, I don't see why they couldn't. Okay, the most interesting thing that I found about what you were saying though was that distinction that if it is in fact that they ban ICOs but not Bitcoin, which I would find really, really interesting, because that would mean that they can distinguish between Bitcoin and ICOs. I know we're talking more about China, but just personally, we've been fairly, careful to stay away from ICOs. We've tried our best to, we've done all of our finance raising from, investors, notable investors in the space. And I used to be a securities advisor many years ago, and kind of like through that I had to study securities laws and things like that. And so I kind of had an understanding or a hunch that just raising money from the public in this fashion might not be something that goes over well. So am I excited by the China ban? Obviously not. I'm not advocating for that at all. But to some extent, I'm not super surprised.
So do you think, do you see more countries attempting to follow China as far as banning ICOs? And do you think personally that China will ban Bitcoin at all? Or
but didn't I didn't realize that someone just clarified for me the other day that didn't China actually ban Bitcoin at one point?
Well, there was back in the day, between 2013 and 2015, they banned it and not banned it like 3 or 4 times, to the point to where there was memes going around all over the place that basically said something like, "Look, I'm immune to Chinese FUD," because this has happened before. So yeah, so I mean, but remember, they didn't actually ever officially ban it,
Exactly. So I think the more interesting parameter to watch is how resilient Bitcoin's price is to these really, what seemingly catastrophic news. You would think, 4 or 5 years ago in the Bitcoin space, if something like this happened, like I could see the Bitcoin price dropping maybe 50%. The fact that it just like drops 5 or 10% or whatever it is, and then it's like back on its way up, is I think really speaks to how decentralized it is, how global it is, and really how awesome it is.
I mean, absolutely. We've had basically 2 bans in a row, the ICOs and the Bitcoin ban from China, and couldn't even drop Bitcoin under 4,000. I don't think it even went below 4,100 on most exchanges. So yeah, it does seem to be continuing to be resilient. I mean, again, as many traders who just trade on technical analysis, like Tone Vays and other traders, they've said that we are just absolutely still in a bull run. There's just no way that that we could go in a bear run. Nobody is looking at a bear run. Even if we go down, we could go down to 3,000 and still be in a bull run. Because remember, we started out the year at 1,000. I don't even know if anybody remembers that. I sure as hell don't. That's been too long in Bitcoin. So the resilience is definitely being proved. So you're pretty much saying that it really doesn't matter, right? If a country bans Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, it depends on what perspective you're looking at it from. Like if you live in China, obviously, that does affect you in a negative way, and that sucks. So I'm not a fan of it. But I think that Bitcoin is proving to be this kind of global safe haven, right? That everyone's was hoping it would be. So yeah, so that's the most exciting thing I think that I take away from this. But will they unban it? Possibly. I mean, if the history represents what might happen in the future, then there's a very high likelihood. And so we'll see. We'll see. Again, I try and focus on my center of influence, and that's like far outside of it. So I don't spend a lot of time thinking about it, to be honest, either.
Yeah. I just have to agree with you that Bitcoin is really proving resilient, and to me personally, like it just doesn't matter at this point if an entire country attempts to ban Bitcoin. Like it'll just, in my opinion, hasten the adoption. It'll just make more and more people, because we all know what happens to things when government buys them. They go up in value because they create an entire dark market around it, like we've seen with the dark markets from Silk Road and others, and Alpha Bay and such like that. If you make something illegal, well, that means it just becomes available in the dark market. So, and sometimes completely explodes. So we'll see how that goes. So Sam, what is your opinion then on what we've talked about so far, and China banning ICOs, and then accidentally, or at least the fake news that China actually banned Bitcoin? What do you think about all that?
I think we need a scoreboard to see which country is going to ban it the most times. China is definitely at the top right now. I think the banning stuff, it's going to get a lot worse when Bitcoin gets proper fungibility. That's when we're really going to start seeing the fight. So I'm personally really hoping that it will get good fungibility under consensus without like Chinese miners getting pressure from the government and whatnot. Really hoping those kind of things won't happen. As for the ICOs, I agree with Sunny there. It's pretty interesting if they would ban ICOs but not Bitcoin, because then they're really making a distinction there, which would probably frustrate a lot of people out of terms of like innovation, etc. But I do get the reasons for it. Now, what does worry me a lot is the fake news stuff, and not just regarding Bitcoin, but in general. If you look at what artificial intelligence is capable of, like in terms of face manipulation and whatnot, within a second, and voice manipulation, like making people say anything they want, that's the kind of stuff that worries me a lot. It's going to be really hard in the future to tell which news is real and which isn't. And of course, we sort of expect the media, the journalists, to vet that for us. But it's just going to become increasingly hard because it's a losing battle for them. They're not developers. They don't have the kind of tools available to them to like reverse engineer all kinds of algorithms used to create fake news. So that's pretty concerning to me. If a few people tweeting something can send a whole market tumbling like that, I mean, obviously it is resilient, but it's not a good thing. It's something that concerns me sort of in the world in overall, I'd say.
Yeah, and it does. Like at first glance, you think about it and you're like, wow, this really is concerning. But then you think about it, and like after what we've seen in the past is that after a certain amount of times, the market just stops caring. Mm-hmm. Like we saw the Chinese exchanges stopped their trading, right? They literally halted trading, and Bitcoin price just went right back up. It started exploding anyway, went over 2,000 anyway. And so, yeah, it seems that the market does learn eventually from this type of stuff. And I just don't think that, hey, so we look at this and we're like, oh no, it dropped it. But wait, if they tried to do this again, it would probably only drop it a little bit less. And then if they tried to do it again, it would drop it even less, until the point to where the market wouldn't care. So I do think that we have a particularly resilient market in crypto, because everything is just real time, global, 24/7, like just everything. It does take like 24 hours for the whole market to process news. But at the same time, we're all watching this stuff in real time, global, on Twitter, IRC, everywhere. So Reddit, and so it's just really interesting to watch this stuff play out. We actually have heard that most of the ICOs that were listed in the Chinese ban, nobody's ever really heard of them. Like there was a list that was put out, it was like over 100 or something, and just never ever heard of them. Like most of them weren't even on CoinMarketCap. Nobody's heard of them. So it is interesting to see which ones they did choose to ban specifically. And we've also heard that on the last episode of the Bitcoin News Show, we had Joe and Yen, who were Chinese miners, on, and they were saying that ICOs were absolutely exploding in China, mm-hmm. that tons of miners were buying ICOs like crazy. And then we hear from Tone Vase, who was just over there in Russia, that ICOs are exploding over there as well. And so I just don't know how the regulators are going to attempt to keep up, like you said, Sam, with all of this new technology. Yeah. They're not developers. I just don't know. It's just going to be it seems to be the Wild West for at least a little while longer. That's for sure. So
it's like It's like a full-time job keeping up with Bitcoin itself. I can't imagine what it must be like to follow up on all of these ICOs, because there's literally hundreds every month.
It's crazy. Like, I spend my full time just keeping up with Bitcoin. Like, I literally spend many hours a day. It's what gets me up every morning to check the news. I think about it all the time, and I still can't keep up with it. I can't even, and I haven't even begun to look at ICOs. Dude, I've not, I have not, I mean, obviously I've seen a few in the top 10 of CoinMarketCap, but I have not looked into any ICOs. I've not studied ICOs. I have not invested in ICOs. I mean, this stuff is crazy. I think I threw a little bit of Bitcoin in Civic, but I mean, like, just to keep up with this stuff is ludicrous. I don't think it's ever going to really catch up to the regulation. I don't think the regulation can ever really catch up, but they're going to try. And I definitely agree with Tone Vase. Let me ask you guys this, because I agree with Tone Vase on this point of view, where we need to regulate the markets themselves. So the people that are holding funds, right? The people that are representing users, the people that are actually holding money on behalf of users, that type of thing should probably be regulated, right? But the actual investor, the anti-money laundering laws, the KYC, all that crap needs to go away. It shouldn't matter who's investing. That shouldn't actually be on record anywhere or anything like that, because a person should be able to choose what they want to invest in, when they want to invest it, and should have their information and investments be private. Shouldn't have to publicly declare any of that, but have regulation on the exchanges and not the users. Let me ask you, Sonny, what do you think about that as you do run an exchange? What do you think about having, the KYC on the exchanges and not for the end user? Do you think that's possible? Or
interesting? I'm trying to understand what you're saying. So a company like Unocoin or Coinbase, you're saying, would essentially to not do KYC on the users that onboard.
Correct.
But at the same time,
but still be regulated, so that, for example, they can't have a run on the exchange, that they actually have the funds that they say they do, and that they're not investing customers' funds, like some of those Chinese exchanges did. That we heard that they were actually investing customers' funds over there without the customers' knowledge.
I see. No, I do foresee exchanges being regulated, right? I mean, in India at this time, they've created committees that are kind of reviewing, the industry and identifying kind of global best practices, and so nothing formal has come out yet, but we project something will. But I do think that exchanges will get they'll have to go through KYC, but I do think that exchanges will also have to do KYC. Like, for example, in our discussions, like if you essentially want to be, working with the banking system, which is, a necessary kind of evil that you have to, if you're going to be the bridge between fiat and Bitcoin, you've got to do that, right? And so you're kind of, you're kind of tied to having to do that to some extent. So I don't see how we get away from it. Now, what I do think eventually will happen is, and again, I don't know how feasible this is, but it's something that I do think about, is essentially the idea of like a decentralized exchange, right? So I do think eventually you'll have these like highly kind of subversive systems that where you don't need to, centralize, but I don't think anyone's quite figured that out yet. I mean, the few examples that are out there, they're not very user friendly. They haven't quite scaled, but I do look at that scene quite closely.
Very interesting. Yeah, I guess that seems more logical to me, to have decentralized exchanges kind of be the next thing and start building liquidity and start being the main center of commerce, instead of these regulated exchanges that are just so far regulated that you can't do anything with them, right? Nobody can invest in them except the top 1% of people on the planet. So yeah, so that seems more logical than regulation catching up and actually not trying to KYC every single freaking person and investor. It seems like before that ever happens, the decentralized exchanges would eventually take off. Like you say, it is early days right now, and the user interfaces aren't there, the liquidity isn't there, but the potential is there. Everybody can foresee it. It's like you ask somebody about a decentralized exchange in the space, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense." It's just the technology is not there yet to actually facilitate.
Yeah, I was going to say is that I do think crypto to crypto decentralized exchanges are much more feasible, right? I think the hard part is where you start thinking about how you would facilitate, fiat to crypto, right? That's the piece that I haven't seen anyone properly tackle. I'm excited about crypto to crypto, but I'm far more excited about like, how do you go from, what we all know and have to Bitcoin?
Absolutely. And of course, I still believe that that's just the transition stage, right? Eventually, we want to not have to worry about the fiat part, but that's, of course, many years down the road. And that's just a dream of every single cypherpunk ever. So, Sam, let's get your opinions on this stuff, man. Like, what do you think about Tone Vase's look on regulation, views on regulation? And what do you think about decentralized exchanges? Do you think we can get there?
I pretty much agree with the viewpoint on exchanges getting regulated, quite likely in that way. Nothing much more to add there. I think you pretty much said it all. As for decentralized exchanges, I think it's going to be difficult. I feel like right now it's a bit early for it. In the same sense that people are saying, for example, yeah, on Ethereum, you can decentralize Airbnb. But people don't want to decentralize Airbnb. They like the fact that when they're in a foreign country, and their host doesn't open up the freaking door, they have a number to call, and that there's a person behind the line there who's going to help them fix their problem. It's just too early days to really get into those fully peer-to-peer systems. I mean, it's really easy for us to get caught up in this because we're constantly into Bitcoin and we assume that everyone has the same kind of mindset about it, but that's really not the case in reality in the world out there today. And when it comes to crypto, people really want to have people to talk to ensure that they're not doing stupid things with their money, that they're not losing it. And if you have a decentralized exchange, that becomes a lot more difficult. Like, who's going to do that? How are you going to pay these people, etc.? There's a lot more factors involved there. So I think it may eventually happen, but right now it's just very early days for it. It's very hard to get the adoption there. I mean, if you see how today so many people still store their Bitcoin in exchanges, and don't store your Bitcoin on an exchange, store it in your own wallet, etc. But people do this. So as long as people are doing this today, I feel like the adoption of a decentralized exchange is going to be pretty hard. The market just needs to be more educated, I guess.
Hey, I just wanted to throw one thing out there, Vortex. So at Unocoin, we just partnered. So for example, Unocoin, we are a centralized service, like I said, and we do, essentially hold on to our customers' private keys until they take it off our system. But I just want to give you kind of a nice story around this. So just 3 days ago, we launched a partnership with blockchain.info, where now anybody who lives in India, that's 1 out of every 7 humans on Earth, who have the blockchain.info wallet, can buy and sell Bitcoin straight from blockchain.info, and it's essentially our API that's kind of working in the background, right? So I do think that that there are steps that entrepreneurs can take and that people in the space can take towards kind of manifesting that kind of end vision, but I think it's going to take time.
Absolutely. And, before we move on from this topic, I do want to say one last thing, because Andreas mentioned this a while back, about how eventually when the tech is there, and you spoke about, Sam, how people want somebody to actually be there, somebody to be able to pick up a phone call on the other line. Well, on the other end. Well, Andreas was talking about in the early days of Bitcoin, he was talking about how in the future there would be all of these peer-to-peer markets that were as a service, right? Peer-to-peer markets as a service. So, for example, if there was a decentralized Uber, there might be like a decentralized service that you could call that would help you in case there was a problem getting your vehicle, right? So that there would be services that you could choose, and there would be a whole market around it. So there would be market-based. So you would choose which service you would like to help you with this issue. And again, that would all be peer-to-peer, decentralized. But again, that's just, years in the future. But maybe something like that can actually help out with these types of decentralized services. It's really so early to tell how this is all going to play out. But it really seems like with these decentralized services or these decentralized applications, there's going to be decentralized services that are going to come out that are going to all have to compete in the market and allow users to choose, which person you want. So, for example, even if you're using like a decentralized exchange, perhaps you can choose which decentralized escrow service you'd like to use, right? And you'd get a list of all the services and their fees and their prices. No, okay, I want to use this one, where it's not like now where you're forced to only use Airbnb always to talk to Airbnb with Airbnb, right? So in the future, hopefully we can choose which service we want to use and which service we want to use to help us. But that's going to be a while away in the future. So if nobody else has anything else to comment on this.
I do have one more thing to say about it.
Sam.
I think just looked at the chat, and Frogbat, if I'm saying that correctly, posted a pretty good comment. I think he said, we don't have to have a decentralized exchange, but an exchange that builds its policies and strategies in a decentralized fashion. And I think that's really going to be like the middle phase in between if we ever do get to decentralized exchanges. So exchanges that really take the decentralized like sort of mindset, culture, whatever in mind. So I just wanted to add that. I thought it was a good comment.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's going to be a bunch of transition phases before we get to the Bitcoin powering the entire planet phase. But I definitely am looking forward to all of the phases in between. So it should be exciting times, guys. So I think we can move on to our next topic. We got about 500 live viewers here with us, which is pretty nice. I understand not having a little bit more than we're having a little bit less than usual because of the breaking Bitcoin and everything like that. So we understand, guys. But we love to have you guys watch us live and be in the chat. We love to participate with you. And of course, if you can't make it, definitely join us in the comments. Leave us a comment, see what you think. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, see what you guys think. We can move on to the next topic here, which is Tokyo. So a Tokyo listed company in Japan there is spending over $3 million to get into the Bitcoin mining space. So my question for you guys, we'll go with Sunny first, the special guest, is what do you think about this? Is this going to kick off the global mining race? Is this going to really kick off a new arms race of Bitcoin mining around the world so that we can actually have it not be so centralized in China? Go ahead, Sunny.
I would hope so. I mean, is $3 million a lot of money when it comes to Bitcoin mining? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing no.
It's in the millions. Well, first of all, it is early days, but with $3 million, you could definitely have a pretty big ass setup. There was pictures that was listed, and it was a pretty big facility. And imagine, remember, using this money in a third world country or somewhere more agrarian, like China or something like that. That money can go a long ways as to setting up. And so we're talking about Tokyo. That's a pretty big first world country, but even still.
No, I hope so. I hope those numbers get bigger, and I hope, you hear about stories of, Russian miners and Canadian miners and, Latin American miners, because that's just, great. And it helps secure the network. And I do think that eventually we're going to get there, right? We're going to get to the place where you're going to have, whether it's like nation states even, or, large companies just battling it out on a global front with regard to mining. I had a short. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you there, Sonny, real quick. It is actually 300 million. The article says.
Oh, there you go. That sounds big. Okay.
It says 3 million in the actual title, but in the URL it does say 300 million. So
yeah, I saw the 300 number too. Okay, 300 million makes sense. Okay, so that's exciting. That's exciting. So again, I just heard about it when I saw your tweet earlier today. So I got to do some more research on it. But like I said, I think it's super exciting. I heard John McAfee. I think he made some announcement where he was going to throw a bunch of money down for a big Bitcoin mining operation. So I haven't heard much about it since. But so yeah, I definitely think that that's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, 300 million, even if it was 3 million, that's not too much, but 300 million, that definitely
that's a lot.
That can be exciting. Because we are talking about a first world country here like Tokyo. There's a lot of it's a pretty sophisticated technological city. So right. It is great to see more and more people dropping money down on Bitcoin mining, because if you think about it, I really thought that the arms race, the global arms race, would have started a little bit earlier, but things move so fast in this space that it's really hard to predict, really hard to figure out when these cycles are going to start to kick off. So Sam, we'll go with you on this. What do you think about this 300 million in Tokyo put to mining? Is this the beginning of what we've been anticipating as a global arms race for Bitcoin mining?
I would even take the 3 million. I think if every company chipped in 3 million, we'd be pretty damn decentralized. So I'm already happy with that personally. I do hope it's going to get a lot more companies interested. I remember that a while back, there was a Swedish telecom company that bought a miner that went bankrupt. And I'm not sure what the name was anymore, but it bought one like that and it mined for a while as well, then it stopped. But those are the kind of things that make some heads turn, that make companies wonder, like, why the hell are they doing this? And is this something we could do as well? And could this be a new source of revenue, etc.? Could this fit into our business model somehow? So I think it's interesting to see companies take those kind of steps. It's just going to make heads turn, maybe not spur any action yet, but eventually that may happen. It's the same like a few years back, if you told your friends that you bought Bitcoin, they would give you this strange face like, why the hell did you do that? Or what is Bitcoin even? But now I see people initiate conversations themselves, like, oh, this Bitcoin thing's really interesting, and it's like still around, and I heard about it again. And I'm like, yeah, you remember I got into it a few years back. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. And so what about this and that? So it's really what gets the conversations rolling, I guess, in a corporate context in this case. So I think it's a very good thing, even if nothing directly comes out of it. Any decentralization is super welcome.
Yeah, I have to agree that, I mean, this is definitely going to make heads turn, I think. This is going to make a few CEOs' heads turn. This is going to make some investors' heads turn. This is going to make a few heads turn, I absolutely believe. And, you know, it is important and worth mentioning that though most of the mining does happen in China, it is actually decentralized within China itself. I mean, like we spoke about on the last podcast, most of these mining facilities are just out in the country, like tens, if not hundreds of miles outside of the cities, you know, to take advantage of the power facilities and to take advantage of the actual natural abilities to cool the miners, like with water and things like that. So it's really interesting to actually speak with these miners and have them tell us that look, there is mining farms all over the place, but they're not all right next to each other. And in fact, they don't even seem to care too much about security or protecting, because they're so far out in the rural areas that they really don't even need like a guy with a shotgun standing there. So it is interesting to see, and I definitely recommend you guys again check out that interview. So let's move on here. If nobody else has anything else to say on this topic, I'd like to actually move on to ask Sonny a few questions here. Sure. If you don't mind there, Sonny. And maybe Sam, you can come up with some questions too if you have any. We can definitely get those in there. So first, Sonny, let me ask you, you do help run the Unocoin exchange there in India. So let me ask you, what's the regulation like there, like right now in India, as far as Bitcoin exchanges or even with Bitcoin mining? Are miners going to jail there at all, like they are in Venezuela, or tell us, maybe you can give us the landscape of what's going on with Bitcoin exchanges and Bitcoin mining over there in India.
Yeah, so well before Unocoin, so this is like almost 4.5 years ago, we took a stab at mining in India, in Bangalore, and I got to see just how challenging it is, right? And it's and we got in right as the difficulty was starting to peak, and so you know, we ended up, it wasn't a very profitable venture. But just to answer your question directly, no, I don't know of anyone being arrested for Bitcoin mining or anything of that sort. You know, again, like just to kind of give the quick kind of Coles notes of what's been happening. So, you know, when we launched almost 4 years ago, within I think a week of us launching, we had 30 or 35 people from the IRS, or the tax department equivalent in India, come to our office, right? So, yeah, so we're not like, you know, some kind of like hidden operation, like it's like we're in the news and whatnot. So it's so we've had the dialogue going, but it's important to keep in mind that, you know, when you talk about like governments have kind of all these different like entities to them, right? There's all these different like 3-letter agencies, and so you can never just make like these blanket statements like, oh, the government, oh, we're great with the government, or with this or that. There's literally like 10s and 20, maybe 30 different departments you need to be interfacing with. So when Bitcoin first came out, the RBI, which is the Reserve Bank of India, essentially said, look, we're going to take a wait and watch policy towards Bitcoin. At the time, there was a central banker named Raghuram Rajan, who actually predicted the financial crisis in 2008. He wrote books about it. He's an electrical engineer from IIT. He was worked with the IMF as a chief economist. And the guy's, you know, he's been on record talking about Bitcoin, you know, in like national television, and he's been kind of, yeah, he said very positive things about it. He said, look, we have concerns about volatility and security, but, you know, long term, we do see something like this kind of, you know, taking shape in a much larger way. And so since then, there's been a new governor who's come in. over about 6 to 9 months ago, there was some people from the government that essentially got really worried about Bitcoin, kind of took it to Twitter, like I guess what everyone does, right? And really a lot of people started asking questions and whatnot. And so as a result of that, the government created a committee with people from all these different departments, and they've invited, so we've also created something called DABFI, which is essentially like an association of all the blockchain companies or the Bitcoin companies in India, as kind of like an industry representative. And we've been interfacing with the government now for several months, trying to address their concerns, trying to explain to them what this technology is, how to essentially, put safeguards in place and whatnot, how to address those questions of volatility and security. And so I think the next few months will be very telling. What the outcome will be is not something, for me to determine, but we do think that things are progressing in the positive direction. A lot of our discussions have been, we've been meeting with key stakeholders in the government, and it seems like that they're not going to take a knee-jerk reaction. I should mention that the whole ICO thing hasn't quite taken off in India like it has in probably China and other places, or at least from my perspective. And so I haven't seen any sort of notices or anything like that coming out of the government. I wouldn't be surprised if it did, especially now with some of the actions that China's taken. But that gives you a little bit of understanding, I guess. And again, but to go into each separate thing would be an hour conversation in terms of how RBI or FEMA or SEBI or whatever, but they are all going on as we speak.
Very interesting. So it does sound like things are going well with the regulation. They're not taking a knee-jerk reaction. Things are going positive, yes?
I mean, again, I'll say this, and then tomorrow we'll wake up and some news will come out, and then it's like, oh, well, it's so much for him. But like I said, it's just, maybe I sound kind of like either shy or non-committal. But the point is, in Bitcoin, there's just so many moving pieces, right? And anytime anybody tries to claim that they're an expert or that they know it all, I just get really, really skeptical. And so I don't want to be that guy that comes up here like, yeah, I got it all figured out. The price is going to be this much. And that's why I hang out with guys like Tone, and I try and learn from everyone. And that's kind of my role, right? Just try and listen and be attentive and not try and take anyone's opinions or mine too seriously.
Absolutely. And that's great. That's great, Sonny. That's why we love you, man. We love the humbleness. We love a CEO who actually doesn't try to make backroom deals and things like that. So we're really happy about that.
Well, actually, just on that note, I mean, so again, I did distinguish between myself and Unocoin, but Unocoin, if you look closely, is a part of Segwit2x. So I saw your Twitter feed and whatnot. But yeah, so and keep in mind that Barry Silbert is somebody who is an important part of our company. He believed in us before we did to some extent, and I think some of the criticism that he's taken in terms of doing the wrong thing, I think is somewhat unfounded. I do think that his intentions were in the right place, are in the right place. And I think he's done just a tremendous amount of heavy lifting for Bitcoin in the background that I think most people haven't seen. Like I said, but personally, I've been a big fan of kind of what the work that Core has done, and I don't want to be disrespectful towards them. I have a good relationship with them, and I think it's one I want to maintain.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think anybody. I think everybody understands that. Barry's position, right? I mean, he's a business guy. He's a CEO guy. He thought that, this was the best route. We all understand that. We understand that this is what he thought was the best route. And but the problem was, that I have is just that he didn't quite take as much advice maybe as he should have from core developers like Eric Lombroso and things like that. But we got Segwit, and we'll see how the 2x happens. There are more and more people pulling out, so. We'll see what happens because we just don't really need it right now, right? The mempool is empty. We got Segwit, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I did talk to a bunch of other. I mean, I did saw on Twitter a bunch of other companies that he had invested in that decided not to take part in Segwit2x, and I'd heard that that it wasn't like he was trying to pressure people or whatever, but I really do believe that he was trying to do the best thing. I was in New York, right? I was in terms of I was hanging out with Eric Lombroso even that night with I think on our second or third night of Consensus, and I do think that Eric and Barry had even met around that time. I saw a picture on again Twitter, right? But so there was dialogue, but yeah, I do think that I think opinions kind of diverged, and hence here we are, right?
Absolutely. So, hey, that's the great thing about Bitcoin. I mean, it's all about consensus, right? If you can get people behind you, go ahead. Great. If not, well, then you better stick to the status quo. So we'll see how it goes. So Sam, you had a question for Sonny as well. I'll let you ask that right now.
I do, but I think you might have already answered it there. I was wondering, since you're pretty much running Unocoin, what do you think is the most challenging thing about running the company? Is it, you mentioned a lot of moving parts within Bitcoin itself. Is it that because there's a lot of uncertainty and things you cannot control as a company, you just kind of have to go along with? Or are there things like you wish your customers knew a certain thing, or do you wish the regulations were clear, etc.? What do you think is the most challenging thing about running it?
Well, so I should clarify again that so I don't run Unocoin in the sense that we have 75 like awesome employees that are all like way smarter than me. So it's actually them that run it day to day, and in terms of I'd say the biggest challenges, if I had to put it into two buckets, one would be what we just finished talking about, which is obviously interfacing with regulators. I think when you come from like the Bitcoin world, there's obviously a very strong kind of bent towards libertarianism, freedom and all of that. And so when you all of a sudden take that world and smash it up against, like nation states, then all of a sudden you're it's not something that I think a lot of Bitcoiners want to deal with, but I think that you kind of like as an exchange you have to, and it's only because we do that, literally thousands of people every day are able to buy Bitcoin from us, right? So like thousands of new people every day. And so so I'd say the second group that I would say, not group, but like kind of bucket is again, and this goes back to our previous conversation about being a centralized service, is that we're subject to a lot of hackers coming after us. And so that is obviously something that anybody who runs an exchange, you're pretty much up all night just trying to dealing with those two elements, right? But yeah, I would say those two. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's definitely the two big pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. I mean, as every security person, pretty much has said, like, the exchange is the number one honeypot. It is the number one attack vector. It's the number one place that hackers are going to go to try to get a free lunch, right? That's where they're going to go. So security is absolutely paramount. And we've kind of seen, like, basically almost every single exchange ever has gotten hacked, like almost every single one. So it's tone base of the mentality that every single exchange will get hacked at some point. But I don't know so much about that. But I do think that security is going to be it's going to drive decentralized exchanges. It's just going to drive it, because there's just no way that we can properly secure the world's money on a database, on a centralized database. That's why Bitcoin was invented, so that we could store the money on the blockchain, right? So we'll see how it goes. And very interesting stuff, though. So thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to put one more thing out there. So if you look at things like Liquid and some of the solutions that the blockstream guys are putting out, it's essentially pointing in that direction, right? Of kind of providing more technological solutions to these problems that exist, instead of just like rules and regulations or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. Side chains like Liquid. I mean, this is cutting edge stuff, and this is what's coming out, really next in the pipeline, and this is being developed right now. So I really am hoping to see a lot more side chain stuff and even drive chain stuff from Paul Stortz come out next year. It's really early days right now, but man, this stuff is moving really fast, and we're going to see a whole bunch of more Bitcoin forks next year. And hopefully friendly forks, of course, like Bitcoin Gold and other things like that. So much stuff is going to be coming down the pipeline next year. I don't even know if we can try to predict it all. But let me ask you one more question here, Sonny. So in general, like over there in India, how are you seeing Bitcoin being adopted? Is Is it
Yeah.
becoming everywhere now, or is it still niche? And is any of those people talking about second layer stuff like Liquid, like sidechains, like Lightning, any stuff like that?
Okay, so hold on. So there's 1 billion people in India, right? Or 1.3 billion. I think if you look at some of the real numbers, it's maybe 1.5 plus, right? So so even if we have, let's say, 500,000 users, that's like a decimal error. Like that's like that's like nothing. It's like insignificant. And so so okay, so I wanted to say that in terms of our growth curve, right? So it took us 3 years. So like I said, we started 4 years ago. It took us 3 years to get to our first 100,000 users. It took us 6 months to get to 200,000 users, right? It took us about 3 months, the next 3 months, to get to 300,000. And recently we just broke 400,000, which took us like a month or a month and a half to get that last 100,000. So we're adding today about between 2,000 to 3,000 users. That was before the blockchain.info announcement, and so that's gonna increase it quite substantially. But that gives you, I guess, in terms of users. In terms of volume, I think it's hard to say. We don't publicize our volume, but it's definitely increasing consistently month over month. 15%, 20%, and so so the business is definitely growing. You're talking about like having phone numbers to call. Like we have our 1-800 number right on the top left, right? So I think we're one of the very few companies in the Bitcoin space where we have like 30 people probably or 25 people in our company that just answer phones. And so so I don't know. I think there's so there's that. And what was your last question, Vortex?
So I was wondering, like, if anybody over there is talking about the second layer stuff, like side.
Right. Oh, right. The second layer stuff. We host the meetups, or some of the biggest meetups in India. It's called meetup.com/India Bitcoin. And we've been doing it for years, like before even we started Unocoin. And so so there's those types of things are emerging. But I'll be frank with you, I would almost say. I say this, with just take it with a grain of salt again, but because I travel quite a bit, like my wife's from Colombia, I'm Canadian, so I spend some time in Canada, so I'm in the US quite a bit, and I gotta admit, I feel that the Indian market is a little bit kind of behind in terms of, like, let's say China or like the United States. Like I would almost say it's like 2 to 3 years behind. And so I don't feel like, SegWit and, layer 2 solutions and things of Lightning Network. I mean, there are things that we obsess about and like, read about, and we're obviously on it. But I think the average person, like I said, I don't think that they're super pumped about this. And again, I could be wrong, but that's just my sentiment.
Very interesting. Okay, cool. So one final then question for you, Sonny, would be, are you guys going to be adding any coins besides Bitcoin anytime soon?
The $1 million question. We definitely get asked to, and for what it's worth, like I've known guys like Anthony Diorio and Vitalik since years before they even wrote the white paper for Ethereum and whatnot. So I've been, really kind of dialed into the whole movement, and I've obviously been proven wrong by the market. I personally did not kind of partake in anything but Bitcoin, but yeah, I mean, the market speaks, right? So that when I speak to all of my fellow exchange, owners around the world, and they say things like, the amount of kind of volume that they're driving by having these other cryptocurrencies, it's hard to kind of not embrace it. But I would say, aside from maybe Zappo and Unocoin, there's not too many companies that are just like only Bitcoin. I should mention one thing. So we did do a partial integration. This was upon my request, a partial integration with Shapeshift, where you can turn cryptocurrencies into Bitcoin. But you can't turn Bitcoin into cryptocurrencies. So, I mean, that's obviously, something that we just tested out, and we understand that the real volume would be on the flip side and doing natural order book exchange and all that. So the answer to your question is yes, we're actively looking at it. But no, we haven't done anything to date. And we don't have like a date in terms of like when we're planning to do anything of that sort, but we are looking at it very closely.
Okay, yeah, cool. I mean, it seems like Litecoin would be a natural, fit to be added next to Bitcoin, because it does seem to always follow Bitcoin. Wherever you'll find Bitcoin, usually you'll find Litecoin. right?
Yeah, see, I'll tell you my main, you know, for the lack of a better word, beef, right? Is that as soon as you said Litecoin, who did I think of?
Charlie Lee, of course.
Right? You say Ethereum, who do you think of? Right? So my point is that if, and again, I think in an interview I did with Chris Rose and these guys like a year ago, I kind of said some things maybe about, you know, Vitalik and Ethereum that maybe came off the wrong way. Like and at no point am I ever saying that like Zuko or any of these guys are like bad, right? Like I think they're all like geniuses. But my point is that as soon as I can name somebody that's associated with a coin, it loses appeal for me. Whereas when you say Bitcoin to me, I think of, you know, DeSantis, I think of Tone Vays, I think of you, I think of me, I think of 1,000 other people that I think that they're Satoshi. And that's the thing that I really, really love. And I think it took a lot of courage for Satoshi to just step away. And I don't know, I can't get away from that. And that's why I'm like you, I'm so obsessed with Bitcoin that I can't find time. It's not that I'm, like, and think about it, like an ICO, as an entrepreneur, like obviously I'm excited at the thought that I can, instead of have to go around and speak to investors and do this song and dance and raise money for our company, if I could just write a white paper and like in 30 minutes raise $100 million or whatever number I choose, like why would I not find that exciting? But again, you know, it's like whenever you have things like this happen, like it just attracts a ton of scammers and so that's why for me, again, it's not about being first to market, it's more just kind of watching and you know, and if this model does work out, then you know, then great. But at this point, like I said, I have more questions than I have answers.
Awesome,
well,
awesome.
I think to add on to the ICO stuff, I feel like it's actually pretty interesting. A lot of ICOs raise a lot of money, but that gives them sort of a false sense of success because they assume, okay, if we're going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, then people will definitely want to use this. But I mean, if you're going to raise hundreds of millions of dollars, it may be the case that that's just speculators buying in, hoping to make a lot of money. And then by the time you launch, actually nobody cares about your product. So I'd say going past VCs and having to do the happy dance, etc., it has its positive sides because those people have seen a lot of products. They understand the market, they understand a lot better what works and what doesn't, what's going to roll and what isn't. So, I mean, yeah, it's exciting to see ICOs take off so much. But on the other hand, the VC side is very much like you have a bit better expectations of what's going to happen.
And my thing is that like, okay, you know, if you're going to raise capital, right? Like, I mean, let's just face it, like a startup is by definition, you know, it's risky, right? Like there's a chance that we might succeed in a huge way, but there's also a chance that we might fail. And so if you know that going into, you know, into an opportunity or an endeavor, then, you know, by design, you probably want to like go and get, you know, raise money from somebody who's a multi-billionaire. You know, if he gives you a couple $100,000 or whatever, and you find 10 people like that, and then if you lost that money, like you would not, obviously, like if you did, your reputation would be gone and stuff. But like, let's just, like, if you did, then you at least know that that person that you got the money from is not gonna lose sleep. Like it's not even gonna affect them. But my fear with the ICOs is that if, you know, if I do a great song and dance and my next door neighbor who's, you know, saved up $100,000 in his 30 years of working and he drops 50 in my ICO, like that, like forget the regulators and everyone, like me as an individual, I think it would be like hard. Let's say the price of that ICO dropped to half, you know, because some fake news came out. I don't know. I just, it's like I said, my instincts usually, like right now, are saying, you know, just to watch and kind of see what's going on. And then, you know, like I said, if it works out in the long term, I'd be super happy.
Yep. I mean, it is, you know, it really is early days, obviously. And, you know, I just went over to some Bitcoin and blockchain job boards the other day just to see what people are posting. And oh my gosh, dude, like every single post is, I need a white paper. I need a white paper. Every single post is, I need a white paper.
And Vortex, every single one of my friends, everybody that's my friend is doing an ICO.
Yep.
I kid you not. Everybody I know that's been in Bitcoin for a while is doing an ICO. So even me saying this, I know I'm you know, people are gonna hate on me, but I'm just telling people, you know, how I feel. And like I said, I'm way poorer because I have this viewpoint.
Oh yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, you know, my morals still won't let me buy Ethereum, so we'll see what happens. I definitely missed that boat, but yeah, it's really crazy that just It's just white papers. It's just ICO. It's just nuts. Everybody's in. So yeah, when it's this frothy, it's definitely pays, I think, to stay cautious. And we'll see how all of these people who are rich in ICO tokens right now, we'll see what happens when the waters recede, right? We'll see if they're actually all still wearing pants or not. But something tells me they're not gonna. So I think that's a great place to end the show, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We had a great time. Sonny, thank you so much for joining us, man. Tell us, where can we find you?
So my Twitter handle is Sunny Startups, and it's where you can also find us at Unocoin. Yeah, I'd say I hang out quite a bit on Twitter, so you can definitely find me there.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely recommend everybody check it out. Check out Sonny's Twitter account. He's got a lot of great stuff. I will, of course, have that in the show notes. Sam, where can we find you, sir?
On Twitter as well, at SD Wouters. And you could also check out that site you mentioned in the beginning, bitcoinsnippets.com, where I save those overviews of what happens in Bitcoin every month. So if you're interested in that, take a look. Thanks for having me on the show.
Definitely
and nice meeting you, Sonny.
All right, yeah, take care. Pleasure.
Yeah, so definitely check that out. Bitcoinsnippets.com. Definitely check that out. I'll have that link in the show notes, Sam. And then, yeah, we'll be back again, of course, guys, next Sunday. We're doing the show every Sunday now, so please come back and join us again every Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific. We're going to have Pierre Richard on the next episode, so really excited about that. It should be a good time, guys. So we had about 550 viewers at the most at the top there. So thanks again so much for joining us in the live show, in the chat. We'll be back again, guys. And until next time, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you guys later.
Later.
Bye.